She thought her husband was just having an affair with one older woman until neighbors started talking. Not just one, not just anyone. It was the grandmas on their street, the widows from the garden club, even her old nanny, the same woman who used to tuck her into bed and call her baby girl. It wasn't just cheating, it was betrayal dressed as care. And by the time she realized how deep it went, she wasn't just fighting for her marriage, she was fighting everything she believed about love, loyalty, and family. If this already has you leaning in, you'll want to stick around. This story unravels slowly, and trust me, the end is nothing like you're expecting. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you love stories that peel back the layers of betrayal and hidden lives, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next secret. Natalie hadn't expected her third trimester to feel like this. Not just the belly aches or the restless nights, those she was prepared for, but the gnawing, unshakable loneliness. The estate was quiet, too quiet. For someone carrying twin boys, the house still felt empty, especially without the warmth of a partner who used to make her laugh at breakfast or kiss her forehead when she couldn't sleep. Cole used to do those things. Now he was elsewhere, present yet missing. They were both in their early 30s, married for 3 years. On the outside, everything looked perfect. Natalie was glowing, carrying the next generation of the prestigious Renner family. Cole was poised to inherit the remaining assets of his late grandfather's legacy: estates, shares, trust funds. His name was printed on magazines and foundation plaques, but inside the walls of their sprawling home, something was quietly unraveling. Natalie would sit alone in the nursery some nights, gently rubbing her belly in slow circles, imagining what the boys would look like. She talked to them more than she talked to Cole these days. Cole was always stepping out. Meetings, errands, quick drives, stress walks. Just clearing my head, he'd say, breezing past her with a half smile that didn't touch his eyes. He was still polite, still charming, still unavailable. Natalie had told herself she was imagining things: hormones, fatigue, isolation. But one morning while doing laundry, her denial cracked. She lifted Cole's hoodie from the laundry basket and was met with the faint, powdery scent of unfamiliar perfume. A sharp floral note she didn't own. Her breath caught. Holding it up to her nose again, she closed her eyes. Not hers, not even close. She shook it off. Maybe a colleague, a handshake, a hug from someone's grandmother at the charity gala. She moved to his pants. Nothing unusual. Then the briefs. She almost didn't see it, but a single, wiry gray hair clung to the waistband. Not white, not silver blonde. Gray. Natalie froze, staring at the small strand like it might move. Her throat tightened. Her hands trembled. It was easy to brush off a perfume scent. It was harder to explain away gray hair on underwear. Her mind darted to wild places. She wasn't ready to accuse. Wasn't even sure she could afford to stress herself out like this. Her OBGYN had told her, emotional stress leads to physical distress. But how could she not think about it? She balled up the briefs and shoved them into the washer, slammed the lid shut, walked away like it hadn't happened. But it had, and she'd seen it. Cole came home late that night. Again. Natalie sat at the kitchen island, pretending to scroll on her phone, watching him from the corner of her eye as he unbuttoned his cufflinks and poured himself a glass of sparkling water. His usual evening habit. "You smell like lilacs," she said casually. He paused, eyes flicking toward her, a microsecond too long before he smiled. "Stop by the florist for the event next weekend. You asked for lilacs, didn't you?" She blinked slowly. She hadn't. "Oh," she said softly. "Right." He smiled again. "Want some water?" "No, thanks." He kissed her forehead on his way upstairs, the gesture automatic, a habit of a man still trying to be a husband. She stayed downstairs staring at the glass he left on the counter, watching a droplet slide down the side like a tear. The next morning, Natalie sat on the porch of their estate, overlooking the trimmed hedges and garden pathway. The fall air was cool but gentle. She wrapped herself in a blanket and watched Cole chat with Mrs. Eleanor, their 70-something neighbor from across the street. Eleanor laughed too loud at whatever Cole had said, and Natalie caught him gently placing a hand on the woman's shoulder as they said goodbye. Natalie's eyes narrowed. It was nothing. Probably nothing. Maybe he was just charming. He'd always been good with people, especially the older donors and family friends. But then she remembered the gray hair and the perfume, and now the garden club widow giggling like a schoolgirl at her husband's jokes. She stood slowly and headed back inside. Something wasn't right. Natalie sat in the nursery again that afternoon, sunlight streaking across the half-painted walls and unboxed baby gear. The room smelled of new cotton and lavender wipes, the safe kind for newborn skin. The cribs were built, the baby monitor was installed, the twin-name plaques, Liam and Luca, still leaned unmounted against the wall. She rubbed her belly, slowly, in rhythmic circles. "Are you two hearing all this?" she whispered, her voice soft and shaky. "Because I'm starting to think your dad's not just busy." Her voice trailed off. She didn't want to say it out loud. Saying it would make it real. And right now, she didn't have the strength to be real. Not when she still had 10 weeks to go. Not when everyone still believed their marriage was perfect. There was a knock at the front door. Natalie froze. She hadn't buzzed anyone in through the gate. Peering through the window, she spotted a familiar face. Celia. Her former nanny stood on the porch, holding a small gift bag, wrapped in peach tissue and tied with a blue ribbon. Her silver curls were pinned back neatly. She wore a powder blue cardigan and flats. Natalie opened the door. "Oh, sweetheart," Celia beamed. "I was passing by and thought I'd drop this off." Natalie smiled politely and stepped aside. "I haven't seen you in weeks," she said, voice steady. "I figured you were avoiding me." "Oh, no," Celia said sweetly. "Just letting you rest. Pregnancy is hard work. Besides, Cole said you were needing quiet lately." Natalie's eyebrows lifted. "He said that?" "Yes, darling. Mentioned it a few times when we ran into each other. He's always so thoughtful. Such a good husband." Celia smiled warmly. Natalie said nothing, her eyes searching Celia's face. That same face that once kissed her scraped knees, read her bedtime stories, and helped her pick out prom dresses. She felt a sudden shiver, like her body already knew something her mind hadn't accepted. Celia handed her the bag. "Just a little onesie and a knit blanket I made. Nothing fancy." Natalie looked inside. The blanket was handmade. Celia had always been a master with yarn. But the pattern, oddly, was the same knit pattern her own baby blanket had used. Too similar. Almost a replica. "Thank you," Natalie said softly. "Of course, I can't wait to meet the twins. You'll be a wonderful mother." Celia leaned in and kissed Natalie's cheek. The scent of her perfume lingered. Lilac. Natalie's body went stiff. Lilac. The same scent from Cole's hoodie. The one he'd claimed came from the florist. Celia pulled back, oblivious. "I should go. Let me know if you need anything, dear." "I will," Natalie lied. As the door clicked shut behind her, Natalie stood motionless in the foyer. She whispered to herself, "Lilac." That night, as Cole showered upstairs, Natalie sat on the couch flipping through a few unopened envelopes from the week. She paused when she noticed one envelope tucked beneath a stack of catalogs. No return address. Handwritten. Folded crisply. Inside, a single card. "Your husband's hands don't only hold yours." No signature. Natalie's chest tightened. She looked up toward the ceiling. The shower was still running. She flipped the envelope over. No name, no clue. She read the message again. Her mind raced. It could be a prank, a sick joke, or maybe, no. She shoved it back into the envelope and slid it beneath a pile of magazines. Her hands were clammy. She told herself she wasn't going to spiral. She'd promised herself she wouldn't let hormones take over. But something deeper was settling in her gut now. A quiet panic that this wasn't just a coincidence, or bad timing, or stress. Something was off, and the signs were piling up. 2 days later, Natalie ran into Mrs. Calhoun, another neighbor from down the block, in the grocery aisle near the estate. Mrs. Calhoun, nearing 70, was sweet and gossipy, always eager to talk about who was redecorating their parlor or whose grandson got into law school. "Oh, honey," she said, spotting Natalie's belly, "you're almost there." 8 weeks left, Natalie smiled. Cole must be over the moon. He's been so charming lately. Even helped me carry my groceries to the car last week. Such a doll. Natalie raised an eyebrow. Really? Oh, yes. He's been such a help to all us ladies on the street. Fixed Mrs. Green's sprinkler head the other day. Always checking in. My late husband wouldn't have lifted a finger for any of us. Natalie forced a chuckle. That's nice of him. Mrs. Calhoun leaned in, lowering her voice like she was about to spill something juicy. I'll tell you something, sweetheart. I think Cole just prefers a different kind of company sometimes. Older women like us know how to appreciate a gentleman. Not like these glued-to-the-phone girls nowadays. Natalie's face drained of color. Oh, she said, her voice faint. Don't worry, dear. I'm sure he treats you like a queen, Mrs. Calhoun added quickly, sensing she might have said too much. Anyway, good luck with the babies. Natalie stood frozen in the aisle as the woman walked away. The bouquet of green onions in her cart suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. That night, Natalie didn't speak much. She ate half her dinner, excused herself early, and went upstairs under the excuse of back pain and fatigue. Cole, ever the composed partner, kissed her forehead and said, Rest up, babe. You've been pushing too hard. She didn't answer him. Instead, she sat in the nursery again, this time in the dim evening light, the lamp casting a warm, low glow on the soft yellow walls. In her lap was the little knit blanket Celia had given her, the one with the identical pattern to her own childhood blanket. She turned it over in her hands slowly, running her fingers across the stitches. It was too perfect, too familiar. A memory surfaced she hadn't thought about in years. Celia sitting at the edge of her bed during one of her teenage meltdowns, knitting the exact same stitch pattern, humming gently while Natalie sobbed into a pillow about a boy who didn't like her back. Celia had always been her comfort, maternal in ways her own mother hadn't always been. Now, Natalie suddenly didn't know who Celia was at all, and she didn't know who Cole was either. The next day, as Cole left for a quick errand, Natalie followed. She told herself she wasn't snooping. She just needed to be sure. She waited 5 minutes after he pulled out of the driveway, then grabbed her keys and drove her car down the estate path, careful not to tail too closely. Cole didn't drive toward the city or his office. He turned left, toward the guest house. Natalie's heart thudded in her chest. The guest house sat at the far end of the property, technically part of their estate, but with its own entrance and garden path. It had been used by visiting relatives, friends, and briefly even Celia when she'd stayed over after her surgery 2 years ago. Now it looked quiet, unoccupied. Cole parked in front and got out, looking around briefly, and then used a key to open the door. He disappeared inside. Natalie parked down the street, heart racing. She waited. 10 minutes, 15, 20. No one else entered. But he hadn't come out. Was someone already in there? Was he waiting? She drove home, numb, her hands gripping the steering wheel like she might break it in half. That night she couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above their bed while Cole slept beside her, breathing evenly, one arm draped across her waist like everything was normal. She turned to her side away from him and let her tears fall quietly into her pillow. He was lying to her. He was lying to their babies. And worst of all, the lies weren't just about infidelity. They were about who he was choosing. They weren't flings with coworkers. They weren't flirty text messages with women at the gym. They were older women, all of them. And one of them might be Celia, the woman who had braided her hair and wiped her tears and told her bedtime stories. Natalie suddenly remembered a time, a few months earlier, when she'd walked into the kitchen and seen Cole pull away from Celia quickly, like they'd been mid-conversation, or mid-something else. At the time, she had brushed it off, but now it burned in her memory like a brand. The next morning, she returned to the guest house, alone. She told the housekeeper she'd be taking a walk. No one followed. The key was still in the drawer where they kept extras. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The guest house was clean, lived in. There was a half-full mug of tea on the counter, a shawl on the sofa, a stack of books. A faint trace of lilac perfume hung in the air like a warning. On the table, a knitting basket and a photograph. one of her and Cole, face down. Natalie picked it up. It was the photo from last year's family Christmas card. The back had a message in Celia's handwriting. "You'll always be the girl who got everything." Her heart slammed against her ribs. This wasn't just betrayal. It was envy, obsession. A woman who'd once raised her now pining for her husband. Her stomach turned. The twins kicked sharply inside her, as if reacting to her shock. She backed out of the room, nearly tripping over the rug on her way to the door. As she stepped outside, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." Her hands went cold. She looked around, suddenly unsure if someone was watching. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of lilac again through the air. Natalie didn't sleep the night she found the knitting basket and the message. She laid awake with her back to Cole, her eyes fixed on the wall, the same phrase playing in her head on a loop. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." She didn't respond to the text. She couldn't, because if she responded, it meant acknowledging that someone had been watching, knew she had entered that guest house. Someone who didn't just betray her, but wanted her to know. Eventually. The question now wasn't just what was happening. It was how far it had gone, and why. The next morning, Natalie stood in front of the mirror in their master bathroom, absently brushing her hair. She didn't look like herself. Her eyes were a little sunken, her lips dry. The skin under her belly was beginning to tighten and stretch as her babies grew. Cole walked in behind her, shirtless and smiling, as if nothing was wrong. "Morning, beautiful," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. He placed a gentle hand on her belly and gave her a soft kiss on the cheek. "They were kicking last night." She didn't answer right away. She looked at them in the mirror. To anyone else, it looked like the perfect couple, a glowing pregnant woman and her adoring husband. But to her now, it felt like watching two strangers play dress-up in a marriage that had already cracked wide open. "They're getting stronger," she said softly. "They kicked me so hard I nearly cried." Cole chuckled. "Strong boys must get it from me." She let him have that one. But when he turned to grab his watch off the counter, she stared at his reflection one more time and whispered to herself, "You disgust me." Later that day, Natalie took a walk through the neighborhood, slowly, carefully. As the wind picked up and leaves scattered across the sidewalk, she passed familiar homes. Houses where people had once cheered at their engagement, where she'd left baby shower invites in mailboxes. She noticed things now she hadn't before, like how Mrs. Green's curtains twitched when she walked by, how Eleanor waved from her porch but quickly looked away, how Mrs. Calhoun whispered something to another neighbor and clutched her chest as Natalie passed. They all knew something, or suspected, or were talking. The silence of the neighborhood suddenly felt heavy, like walking through a party where everyone knew a secret but you. Back at home, Natalie sat at the kitchen counter staring at her untouched tea. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number, a different one than before. "He's always preferred us seasoned. The youth is just for show." She nearly dropped the mug in her hand. Her stomach twisted. It was no longer just a suspicion or even a betrayal. It was a game. Someone, or more than one person, was enjoying watching her come undone. Who were these women? Were they coordinating? Was this Celia or one of the others? And why was she being taunted like this? Like she was the outsider? She felt nauseous and had to brace herself on the counter. She didn't mention the text to Cole. Instead, she studied him, his schedule, the way he brushed his hair in the mirror or tied his tie before a meeting. He seemed lighter, less burdened, almost like a man in love, but not with her. The heartbreak wasn't in a loud scream or a broken plate. It was in the quietness, the restraint, the way her body still responded to his touch out of habit, even as her heart begged her to pull away. Natalie started keeping a journal again, not to document his wrongs like a detective, but to survive, to make sense of what was happening. In it, she wrote, "He used to joke that I was an old soul. Maybe that's why he's replacing me with older bodies. I don't know what hurts more, the betrayal or the type of woman he chose to do it with." Natalie didn't leave the house for 2 days after the second anonymous text. She felt like a ghost inside her own home. floating from room to room, trying to stay calm for the babies, but barely managing her own thoughts. Her OB had warned her last month about stress-induced complications, and now every cramp, every twinge, every irregular flutter sent her spiraling with fear. She told no one, not even her best friend, because what would she say? I think my husband is sleeping with several older women on our street, including the woman who helped raise me. No one prepares you for a sentence like that. On the third morning, the doorbell rang. Natalie, in her robe and fuzzy socks, shuffled to the front door. She expected the gardener or maybe a package delivery. It wasn't. It was Mrs. Laney, a widow in her 70s who lived 2 streets over, not particularly close to Cole or Natalie, but well known for hosting local brunches and fundraising garden parties. She held a small box and a bouquet of freshly cut wildflowers. "Natalie, darling," she said with a soft smile, "you crossed my mind today. I heard you're expecting twins. I know this stage can be lonely. I remember it like yesterday." Natalie hesitated. "Hi. Thank you. May I come in? Just for a few minutes. I won't stay long." Natalie nodded reluctantly and stepped aside. Mrs. Laney sat at the kitchen island while Natalie poured her some tea, hands slightly trembling. She couldn't explain why. Something about the woman's presence felt off, familiar, too familiar. "I brought you a little gift," Laney said, sliding the box toward her. "Something for the nursery." Natalie opened it, a handcrafted mobile made of small felt stars and moons. Delicate, expensive looking. But what caught her eye wasn't the craft. It was the monogram stitched into the side. C&N Cole and Natalie. Except Natalie had never mentioned her baby room plans to this woman, and the twins weren't even named publicly yet. Her throat dried. "Thank you," she said carefully. "This is thoughtful." Laney smiled, sipping her tea. "You're a lucky girl, Natalie. Cole's a man who knows how to make a woman feel seen. Even now in your condition, he still looks at you with such fondness." Natalie looked up sharply. "Have you seen him lately?" Laney tilted her head, almost amused. "Oh, we all have. He's generous with his time. Kind. So attentive." There it was, a line too perfectly crafted, almost taunting. Natalie stood. "I should lie down soon. The boys are active today." Laney rose slowly, placing her teacup in the sink. Before leaving, she reached out and gently touched Natalie's shoulder. "Be kind to him, dear. Men like Cole don't stay tied down for long when they're misunderstood." Then she walked out. Natalie locked the door behind her and burst into tears. She wanted to scream, to throw the mobile across the room, to run to Cole and demand the truth. But something deeper held her back. Shame, and the dread of knowing, truly knowing, what he'd say if she asked. Because there was no way a woman like Laney, elegant and proper, just decided to show up with a custom gift stitched with initials. No way she just happened to bring flowers that smelled like the perfume Natalie had once caught lingering on Cole's scarf months ago. This wasn't coincidence. This was a pattern. That night, Cole came home humming to himself. Natalie watched him from the stairs, her body hidden in the shadows. He didn't look like a man who was hiding. He looked like a man, relieved. She suddenly wondered if he saw these older women as refuge. Women who wouldn't question him, who'd worship him, feed his ego. Women who'd never say no. And maybe, in his twisted mind, that felt like love. But to Natalie, it was something else entirely. Humiliation, disgust, and danger. Because if he could lie this well, betray this deeply, what else was he capable of? Natalie sat in the dark. No lights, no sound. Just the soft tick of the wall clock and the occasional thud of her unborn twins stretching inside her. Every part of her body was sore, but the ache in her chest outmatched them all. She had never felt so alone in a house so big. She had reached her breaking point. At around 11:17 p.m., long after Cole had gone to sleep beside her like a man with a clear conscience, she padded down to the kitchen barefoot and pulled out her journal. The last few entries had been cautious, vague, but this one was different. She wrote, "They say betrayal hurts worst when it comes from someone you trust. But what they don't say is what it does to your sense of reality. How suddenly you question whether your memories were even real to begin with. Did he ever love me? Was I just young? Was I just convenient?" She paused. The soft glow of the refrigerator light spilled across the marble floor as she poured herself a glass of water. She was about to head back upstairs when her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She didn't want to look. But she did. It was a photo this time. Natalie's breath caught in her throat. It was a zoomed-in shot of her, sitting on the porch earlier that day, alone, her hand on her belly, a candid moment, vulnerable, intimate, and underneath it, a single text message. "She was watching you the whole time." Natalie's heart slammed against her ribs. She backed into the kitchen island, nearly dropping the phone. She wanted to scream. Who was she? Celia? Was someone watching her now? Her gaze darted toward the back door. The curtains were closed, but what if someone was outside? She locked every door, every window, pulled every blind. Her breathing was fast, sharp. The twins kicked as if reacting to her adrenaline. And in that moment, Natalie knew something had changed. This wasn't just a husband with wandering hands. This was a man tangled in something deeper, something he was no longer in control of. And she had become the collateral damage. The next morning, Natalie was calmer. Too calm. Cole was already downstairs sipping coffee and scrolling his tablet. He looked up and smiled, like always. "Morning," he said. "You look beautiful." Natalie didn't return the smile. She sat across from him and watched him, studied the way his eyes blinked twice quickly when he lied, how he sipped before speaking when he was nervous. "I think we should talk," she said quietly. He looked up, surprised. "About?" "The guest house." Cole blinked. She didn't stop. "And the perfume on your hoodie, and the gray hair on your briefs, and Celia's handwriting on a photo I didn't know she had." Cole froze. His throat moved. Once, twice. Like he was trying to swallow something stuck. "Natalie," she held up a hand. "I'm not accusing you, Cole. I'm just asking, how many?" His eyes dropped to the table, and for a moment, just a flicker, she saw guilt. Not defensiveness, not denial, just raw, exposed shame. But before he could answer, the front doorbell rang. They both looked toward it. Natalie stood slowly, hand resting on her stomach, and walked to the door. She opened it and froze. It was Celia, hair perfectly styled, makeup on, a basket of pastries in her hands, like nothing had happened. "Good morning, sweetheart," she smiled. "I thought I'd bring by something warm. You must be exhausted carrying those twins." Natalie stared at her. No words. Behind her, Cole's voice came softly from the hallway. "Celia?" Celia smiled wider. Too wide. Natalie stepped aside. "Come in," she said, voice cold. "We were just about to have a very honest conversation." Celia stepped into the house like she always had, comfortably with the air of someone who belonged there. Natalie watched her closely. The scent of lilac trailed in behind her. Cole stood frozen in the hallway, gripping his coffee cup like it was anchoring him to the floor. He hadn't expected her, and it showed. His face, which had always been trained to perform calmness, cracked in the small ways. The twitch of his jaw, the sudden dryness in his voice. "Celia," he repeated, softer this time. "You didn't call." Celia gave him a polite smile. "You said I could stop by anytime." She placed the basket of pastries on the counter as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just made every hair on Natalie's neck stand up. Natalie leaned against the island, arms crossed. "Actually, we were just about to have a conversation," she said flatly. "You might as well stay." Celia looked between them. Her smile faltered for the briefest second. "Oh, I don't want to intrude." "You're already here," Natalie cut in, "and I'd like to ask you a question." Celia's fingers clutched the strap of her purse. Natalie tilted her head. "How long?" she asked. Celia blinked. Cole opened his mouth, but Natalie held up her hand to stop him. "I'm not asking you," she said, eyes still locked on Celia. "I want to hear it from her." The silence stretched. Then Celia gave a soft sigh, a familiar, maternal sigh. the kind she used to give when Natalie misbehaved as a child. A while, Celia admitted. Natalie's stomach turned. A while, she repeated. You've been in our home, helping me set up the nursery, knitting blankets for my sons. Our sons, Cole interrupted. Natalie turned sharply. Not now, Cole. Celia stepped forward. Natalie, I know this hurts, and I never meant to. You didn't mean to, Natalie snapped. Her voice cracked. You were like a second mother to me, Celia. You were there for every milestone. And now, you're sleeping with my husband? Celia flinched. Cole finally spoke. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Natalie let out a hollow laugh. Oh, that makes it better. She looked between the two of them, her husband, the father of her unborn children, and the woman who had practically raised her. You know what's worse, she said quietly. It's not just her, is it? Cole's silence was louder than a confession. Natalie's voice wavered. It's not just Celia. It's all of them. Eleanor, Mrs. Calhoun, Laney, maybe more. Celia stiffened. You told her? She asked Cole sharply. I didn't tell her anything, Natalie said coldly. I figured it out. You all made it too easy. Cole dropped his gaze. I didn't plan any of it, he said weakly. It just happened. It started before we were married. I thought I could stop. Natalie laughed again, this time bitter, broken. You married me knowing you were attracted to my grandmother's friends? Celia spoke, her voice suddenly brittle. You don't understand what it's like to be invisible, Natalie. To feel like your body has aged out of desire, out of touch, out of love. Cole saw me, sees me, the way no one has in decades. Natalie stared at her, stunned. I was a child when you met me. You braided my hair. You helped me with homework. And now you're justifying this like it's some grand love story? Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, but she held them back. Celia didn't answer. The room went still. Natalie's voice softened, just barely. I want you both to leave. Cole looked up. What? I'm going to my mother's. You're going to stay somewhere else until I figure out what to do with this mess. And you, she turned to Celia, are never to come near me or my babies again. Celia's lips parted, but she said nothing. She picked up her purse, adjusted her cardigan, and walked out. No apology, no final glance. Cole stood there. Natalie, she stepped past him. Don't, she said. Just don't. She went upstairs, locked the door, and curled up on the nursery floor. Everything she thought she knew, her marriage, her family, her past, had turned to dust. But she wasn't broken, not yet, because something inside her, some quiet fire, had just started to rise. And this time, she wouldn't let it die down. Natalie didn't cry after Celia left. She thought she would. She thought she'd collapse in a sobbing heap on the nursery floor, wailing like the heartbroken wife in a bad soap opera. But she didn't. Instead, she sat quietly, her hands cradling the swell of her belly as the twins shifted beneath her skin, alive and unaware of the storm brewing outside the womb. That was the moment she realized something. She wasn't powerless anymore. Maybe she had been a passive observer in her own life for too long, letting Cole lead, letting her friends decide her baby shower theme, letting the illusion of a perfect life guide her actions. But not anymore. Not after this. Natalie picked up her phone and opened her voice recorder app. If Cole and his army of aging mistresses wanted to make her feel small, invisible, and betrayed, she would speak louder than all of them. She pressed record. They say the worst kind of betrayal comes from the ones who are supposed to protect you. But what no one tells you is that betrayal can also be the most powerful fuel in the world. Because now I see everything. Now I'm awake. She hit stop. It wasn't for social media. It wasn't even for a lawyer. Not yet. It was for her, the version of herself who had once written Mrs. Natalie Renner in bubbly letters at the bottom of her high school notebook. The version who thought marriage and babies equaled forever. That girl was gone, and the woman in her place was starting to think clearly. Natalie gave Cole 1 day to leave the house. He didn't fight it. She was surprised, maybe even a little disappointed. A small part of her wanted him to beg, to fall apart, to unravel the way she had in the nursery. But he didn't. He left like a man who knew he'd already lost the game. Or maybe like someone who had another backup plan already waiting. That made her sick. She didn't care where he went. A hotel, a friend's. Back to Celia for all she cared. What mattered was that he was gone. The house felt different afterward. It breathed easier. The walls didn't echo with silence anymore. They pulsed with relief. Natalie started moving room to room, cleaning, packing up reminders of him, a mug, a hoodie, a toothbrush. Everything went into a box. She taped it shut and left it on the front porch with a note, "Come pick this up. Do not knock." She sat in her OB/GYN's office a few days later, feet up in stirrups, a gentle smile on her face as the doctor glided the probe across her belly. "There they are," the doctor said warmly, turning the screen so Natalie could see the twin boys. Their perfect little silhouettes, squirming, alive, real. "Heartbeats are strong. You're measuring on time. Blood pressure looks good." "Thanks," Natalie said softly. "I was worried. Things have been stressful lately." The doctor gave her a look, a kind of motherly concern. "Anything I should know about?" Natalie hesitated, then shook her head. "Not yet. I'll be okay." But later that night, she opened her laptop and began drafting a letter. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular. Not yet. But it started with this: "To whom it may concern, I am writing to document the emotional distress I've endured during my high-risk pregnancy, directly related to the actions of my husband, Cole Renner." She didn't send it, not yet. She saved it as a draft. But it was the first step, a quiet declaration that she was no longer sitting still. Later that week, she passed Eleanor in the grocery store. The older woman smiled too widely, pushing her cart full of scented candles and wine. Natalie smiled back. But this time, it wasn't fake. It was weaponized. "Afternoon, Eleanor," she said with sugary warmth. "Still enjoying those yoga sessions Cole got you into?" Eleanor blinked. "Oh, yes, he's been helpful, always so kind." Natalie leaned in. "Well, you're welcome to him now. I hope he likes prune juice and unspoken shame." She pushed past her, leaving Eleanor standing stunned in the dairy aisle. For the first time in weeks, Natalie grinned. Not a sad, tired smile. A real one. By the time the weekend rolled around, Natalie had settled into a strange kind of rhythm. Part survival, part strategy. She ate small meals, took slow walks around the estate, and kept a notepad next to her bed where she jotted thoughts, memories, suspicions. A map of betrayal was starting to take shape. She wasn't just mourning a marriage anymore. She was preparing for war. And then on Saturday morning, something unexpected happened. The doorbell rang. Natalie paused and cautious. She wasn't expecting anyone. Cole wouldn't be foolish enough to show up uninvited, and her family knew to text before visiting. She opened the door slowly. Standing there was Maya, her best friend, maid of honor, the only person in her life who had never once betrayed her trust. Natalie blinked. You're supposed to be in San Diego." "I drove all night," Maya said, stepping forward and wrapping her in a tight hug. "I saw your message, the one you sent about everything. I couldn't not come." Natalie didn't realize how much she needed that hug until she was in it, sobbing quietly into Maya's shoulder like a dam finally breaking. Maya pulled back, gently brushing her hair. "Tell me everything." Natalie did. They sat for over an hour, Natalie pouring it out in raw detail. The guest house, the knitting basket, the photo with Celia's handwriting, the whispers from neighbors, the perfume, the older women, the anonymous texts. Maya listened, silent, stunned. When Natalie finally stopped talking, Maya reached into her tote bag. "I didn't come empty-handed," she said, pulling out a small black leather-bound planner. "I know you hate snooping, but I found this in your guest room the last time I stayed. I thought it was mine at first. It's not. It's hers." Natalie took the planner slowly, opening it to a bookmarked page. What she saw made her heart drop. Dates, times, names, written in Celia's cursive handwriting. Mrs. Green, Laney, Eleanor. Back patio, 6 p.m. Red wine. Coal. Each entry was paired with a heart, a check mark, and in some places a note like, confirmed, or she suspects nothing. Natalie closed the planner with shaking hands. Celia kept track, she whispered. Maya nodded. It's like a playbook. She was organizing them, scheduling him, managing it. Natalie's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just betrayal, this was orchestration. Celia hadn't just inserted herself into Natalie's marriage, she had weaponized the other women, created an ecosystem where she was the center. Natalie stood up and walked to the window. Her voice was quiet, cold. I'm going to end this. Maya stood beside her. I'll help you. They stood together, two women staring out at a world that no longer made sense, but one of them had finally stopped feeling afraid. That night, Natalie did something she never thought she would. She called Celia. The line rang once, twice, then picked up. Natalie, Celia said softly, are you okay? I'm fine, Natalie said, voice even. I just had one question. Of course. Natalie took a breath. When did it start? The very first time? There was silence. Then Celia whispered, your wedding night. Natalie felt her knees buckle, but she caught herself on the counter. You kissed him the night I married him? I didn't plan it. He was drunk. I was emotional. It just happened. Natalie closed her eyes. That's all I needed to know. Then she hung up. She sat in the nursery again that night, this time not with grief, but with clarity. She pressed record on her voice memo again. It started on my wedding night, not the fairy tale, not the marriage, the betrayal, the lies, the games. It all started the moment I said, I do, and he said, I might. But this story isn't ending the way they think. She saved the file. Then she picked up Celia's planner, flipped to the first page, and began circling names. Natalie had never thought of herself as someone who would go public with her pain. She was raised to keep things polite, to smile, to smooth it over, to protect the image of the family no matter what happened behind closed doors. But the old Natalie, she had died the night she learned her nanny had been sleeping with her husband since her wedding day. The new Natalie, she had nothing to protect anymore, nothing left to lose, and she was ready to make sure no other woman felt the way she did, blindsided, gaslit, and silenced by shame. Late one night, while the house was quiet and the twins fluttered inside her belly, Natalie opened her laptop and typed 6 words into a private online forum for women. Would you believe me if I said, my husband is cheating with our neighborhood's widows, including my ex-nanny? She hit send. The response was almost instant. First came the stunned replies. This can't be real. Is this satire? Girl, please tell me this isn't true. Then came the messages of support. You're not crazy. I believe you. Men like that are predators. Full stop. The audacity of some older women? I've seen it. But then, the tide shifted. One reply stuck out, and it hit her like ice water. Sounds made up, like you're jealous of older women for no reason. Then another. You're just mad your husband has a mommy kink. And then, are we sure she's not making this up for attention? There's no way severe old women would go for the same guy. Be serious. Natalie stared at the screen. After everything, the planner, the text, the confession, she still wasn't being believed. That night she didn't sleep. She walked the hallway like a ghost, back and forth in the dark, rubbing her belly and whispering to herself, I know what I saw. I know what happened. They don't have to believe me. They weren't there. But the seed of doubt had been planted, not about what happened. She knew the truth, but about whether anyone would ever believe it if she spoke it out loud. 2 days later, Natalie received an anonymous email. No subject line, just an attachment, a 90-second audio recording. She hesitated before hitting play. The voice that came through was Celia's. Her voice was calm, composed, and unmistakably cold. You have to understand, these women, they're lonely. Some of them haven't been touched in years. I didn't force Cole to do anything. He offered. He enjoyed it. And as long as Natalie didn't know, No one got hurt. Another voice, not Cole's, replied, "You're playing with fire, Celia." "She's not stupid," Celia laughed. "No, but she's still just a girl, and we've all raised girls before. You give them a few compliments, a couple of gifts, they'll forgive anything." Click. End of recording. Natalie sat frozen. She didn't know who had sent it, but someone in that inner circle was clearly cracking. Maybe it was one of the other women. Maybe it was someone who had regrets. Either way, it was proof. Not just that Cole had betrayed her, but that Celia had manipulated all of them, orchestrating some twisted inner circle of older women, each feeding off Cole's attention and silence. It wasn't just infidelity, it was emotional warfare. The next morning, Natalie made a decision. She dressed with intention. A fitted navy maternity dress, hair pinned up, earrings that sparkled just slightly when they caught the light. She wasn't going to hide anymore. She walked 2 blocks to the garden club, where Celia and several other women gathered every Saturday for tea and community gossip. The moment she stepped in, the room hushed. Eleanor paused mid-laugh. Mrs. Green lowered her teacup. Celia stood slowly, dressed in cream, pearls draped across her collarbone. "Natalie," she said, voice as pleasant as ever, "you look radiant." Natalie didn't blink. She walked straight to the center of the room, her heels clicking like war drums on the hardwood floor. "I'm here," she said, "to return what doesn't belong to me." She pulled Celia's black planner from her tote and dropped it on the table. Celia's smile finally broke. "What is this? You know what it is." Gasps, whispers. A few women exchanged nervous glances. Eleanor reached for the planner, flipped it open, and blanched. I don't remember agreeing to this." "Because you weren't asked," Natalie said sharply. "You were groomed, just like I was. The only difference is, I married him. You all rotated him." A choked silence. And then Celia laughed. Actually laughed. It wasn't warm or ashamed. It was mocking. "Oh, sweet girl," she said. "Do you think this makes you look strong? Storming in here with stories and accusations? Look around. These women came to me. They were grateful." Natalie's voice was like a blade. "You were supposed to protect me." "And I did," Celia snapped, "until you became inconvenient." That line shattered something in the room. The older women looked between them, suddenly unsure where the truth began or ended. But then, the double doors opened, and Cole walked in. Cole stood at the entrance of the garden club, framed by afternoon sunlight and tension. For a full 5 seconds, no one moved. Natalie froze, her mouth slightly parted. Celia blinked once, and then, without hesitation, smiled. "Cole," she said gently, like she was greeting a beloved houseguest. "I didn't expect you so soon." "I saw your car parked out front," he replied, strolling in like he owned the room. "Figured I'd check in." His gaze scanned the space, the stunned older women, the spilled planner on the table, and finally, Natalie, his wife, the mother of his unborn sons, the woman standing in a room full of her husband's mistresses, confronting the wreckage of a life he'd helped burn down. Natalie straightened her back. "I was just returning something of Celia's," she said, her voice steady but low. "You know, her little black book. The one with all your extracurricular appointments." Cole glanced at the planner but didn't flinch. Instead, he looked at Celia, and in front of everyone, he smiled. "You okay?" he asked her. Natalie's breath caught. Celia nodded sweetly. "I'm fine, darling." Natalie turned to the room. "Did everyone hear that? He called her darling. Not me. Not his wife. Not the mother of his twins. Her." Cole's voice was smooth. Too smooth. "Natalie, you're emotional. And you're disgusting," she snapped. "You've lied to everyone in this room. And you," she said, turning to Eleanor, Mrs. Green, and the others, "you let it happen. You were in on it." Mrs. Calhoun finally spoke, voice shaking. "We didn't know. Not at first. He said it wasn't serious." "He said that to all of you," Natalie shouted. And then she laughed. Not bitter, but hollow. You all wanted to feel seen, desired, fine. But what about me? The pregnant wife? The woman who thought she was building a life, not starring in a neighborhood scandal? Cole stepped forward. Natalie, stop. You're making a scene. She turned on him. I am the scene, Cole. You made me one. Every time you left the house and went for a walk or offered to help trim someone's rose bush, you were building this moment. Her voice cracked. Finally, the pain spilled through. I gave you everything and you gave yourself to anyone with a pearl necklace and free time. A sharp gasp. One woman actually put her hand to her chest. Celia moved closer to Cole, possessively. She's not well, Celia said calmly, her hand lightly brushing Cole's arm. Natalie stared. You're touching him here? In front of me? Cole looked uncomfortable now, but not ashamed, just inconvenienced. We can talk about this at home. Natalie let out a cold laugh. There is no home. And then she pulled her phone from her coat pocket and hit play on the audio recording. Celia's voice echoed through the garden room. These women, they're lonely. Some haven't been touched in years. I didn't force Cole to do anything. He offered. He enjoyed it. And as long as Natalie didn't know, no one got hurt. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers. One of the older women stood up and stormed out, red in the face. Another dropped her teacup, shattering porcelain. Celia's face changed. Gone was the mask, the kindness, the smile. She stepped toward Natalie. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Natalie didn't flinch. No, you don't. I was silent for months, but I'm done now. And the world will hear this. Cole stepped in between them, voice low and urgent. Natalie, please. You'll regret going public with this. Think about your image, the babies, your family name. That hit something deep inside her. She looked at him, eyes sharp. You only care about the name now because mine still means something. But you're a man who sleeps with grandmothers and calls it connection. You've embarrassed yourself. And the only regret I'll have, she paused, is that I didn't speak up sooner. She turned to leave, but just before she reached the door, someone called out. Wait! Everyone turned. A woman near the back of the room, mid-30s, dark curls, sunglasses pushed into her hair. She looked directly at Natalie. You're not the first woman Celia's done this to. I've been waiting years for someone to finally expose her. Natalie blinked. Who are you? The woman stepped forward. I'm Madeline. Celia was married to my father for a while. She raised me. And then she did the same thing to my fiancé. Gasps rippled again. Madeline's voice wavered. I tried to speak out, but no one believed me. They called me hysterical, emotional, just like they're calling you now. Natalie's lip trembled. Why now? Madeline smiled grimly. Because you finally made her bleed. The garden room had emptied. Celia was gone, whisked away by one of her shaken friends, her face pale, her pearls askew. Cole had tried to speak to Natalie before she left, but she brushed past him with a look so cold it could have frozen glass. Now only Natalie and Madeline remained. They stood in the parking lot as the sun dipped below the trees, casting long shadows over the sidewalk, like tangled truths waiting to be straightened. Madeline leaned against the hood of her car, arms crossed. Natalie stood across from her, arms still wrapped around her belly like armor. I always knew she'd get caught, Madeline said quietly, but I didn't think it would be by someone like you. Someone like me? Natalie asked. Madeline nodded. Pregnant, married, proper. She always targeted girls who'd never be believed. Teens, stepdaughters, lonely young wives. She counts on us staying silent. Natalie swallowed hard. She was like a second mother to me, she whispered. She used to braid my hair, hold me when I cried. I thought she loved me. Madeline looked down. She did, in her own twisted way. But love isn't the same for people like her. It's about possession, obedience. And when you grow up, when you become the woman instead of the girl, she can't control you anymore. They stood in silence for a moment. Natalie asked the question that had haunted her for weeks. Do you think she really loved him? My husband? Madeline shook her head. No, but she loved the power it gave her. The control, turning him into her pawn, making him choose her over you. That's the part she gets off on. Natalie's stomach turned. All this time she thought it was about infidelity, lust, loneliness, some twisted midlife desire. But it was deeper than that. Celia hadn't just betrayed her, she had played her, all her life. Madeline reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope. I've been collecting things for years, she said. Letters, screenshots, emails, other women's testimonies. I planned to go to the press once, but I was scared. Natalie took the envelope with both hands. I'm not scared anymore, she said. Madeline nodded, tears in her eyes. You're the first woman she couldn't finish. That night, Natalie sat at her kitchen table, the envelope open before her, the audio files saved, the planner beside her like a black relic. She opened her laptop and began typing, but not to a private forum this time. This time, it was for the world. She titled it, The Nanny, the Neighborhood, and the Man Who Forgot Who His Wife Was. She didn't name names. Not yet. But she didn't need to. The story itself would go viral. Because it wasn't just her story, it was every woman's. By morning, it had 400,000 views. By noon, she was trending on local forums. By evening, her inbox was full of messages from strangers. Some were angry, some disbelieving, but most were grateful. Women wrote in with their own stories of betrayal, of older women who had crossed lines, of men who blurred boundaries, of trust broken inside homes that were supposed to feel safe. And in all of it, Natalie saw the truth. Her pain wasn't isolated, it was echoed, and she had finally found her voice inside the noise. She was in the nursery later that day, folding baby clothes when her phone pinged. A new message. No name, no subject, just a video file. She hesitated, then played it. It was a surveillance clip, grainy, black and white, a driveway camera. It showed Cole and Celia outside someone else's house. Celia was yelling. Cole was shaking his head. Then he got into his car and drove away. Celia stood there, alone, lips trembling. Then she collapsed onto the front steps, just sat there, for minutes. No one came to help. Natalie watched the footage 3 times, and finally, for the first time since all this began, she felt nothing. Not rage, not grief, not vindication, just a quiet, steady calm. She recorded one more voice memo before bed. Some stories don't end with revenge, some end with silence. And sometimes that silence is the loudest thing in the world. Natalie knew labor would come early. Her body had been warning her for days, not through pain, but through the quiet exhaustion, the breathlessness, the way her emotions swelled like ocean tides and never fully receded. She had her go bag packed. The nursery was done. She was as ready as a woman could be. Knowing she was bringing 2 boys into a world that had just shown her as sharp as teeth. What she didn't expect was the letter. It arrived on a rainy morning. No return address, no handwriting, just her name, typed neatly on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I wasn't supposed to love him. I just wanted you to need me again. But then he started needing me too. And I got lost. I'm sorry. I'll disappear now. See, Natalie read it once, then again, and then she did something she hadn't done in weeks. She laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so Celia, still trying to control the narrative, still trying to sign off with some tragic poetry like she was the victim of her own story. Natalie folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer she'd already labeled for the lawyers, and turned her attention back to packing hospital paperwork. She had more important things to do. Later that evening, her water broke. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just a shift, a knowing. Maya was already on standby and rushed over within minutes, grabbing her bag and helping her into the car. The ride to the hospital was a blur of streetlights, deep breaths, and whispered affirmations. You've already survived the worst pain, Maya said gently. This is just your body finishing the story. They wheeled Natalie into a private room, soft lights dimmed, monitors beeping gently in the background. The labor wasn't short, it wasn't smooth, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She didn't cry until the first baby wailed, and then the second. Two boys, tiny, breathing, whole. Her future, staring up at her from two blankets and one broken past she never had to revisit again. They asked if she wanted to list Cole on the birth certificate. She said she needed time. In the quiet of the recovery room, Maya snapped a photo of Natalie holding her sons. Tired eyes, slight smile, the storm finally behind her. She sent it to Natalie's private account with a simple caption, "You won." Natalie didn't respond right away. Instead, she recorded one last voice memo. Not for the world, not for the court, but for herself. And maybe one day, her sons. You were born after a war, a quiet one, but brutal all the same. One day, I'll tell you about the strength it took to bring you into this world, about the lies we had to walk through to make room for something true. You'll know that your mother didn't stay silent, and because of that, you'll never have to. She saved the file under their names, then she held them both, and finally rested. Natalie had been home from the hospital for 3 days when Cole finally showed up. She wasn't surprised. Men like him don't leave without a goodbye. They circle back to rewrite the story, to soften the ending in a way that still paints them in shadows of gray instead of the black they earned. He didn't bring flowers or a gift, just himself, and that, as always, was the problem. Maya opened the door when he knocked. She didn't say anything, just stared at him with the kind of look that made people regret showing up. She's resting, Maya said. I won't stay long, Cole replied. I just want to see the boys. She said no visitors. He took a breath, stepped forward. I'm not a visitor. I'm their father. Natalie's voice came from down the hall, calm, clear, and steady. No, Cole, you're not. He turned, startled. She was standing in the hallway, robe tied over her nursing tank, hair messy but face composed. You're biologically connected, she continued, but you forfeited the right to be called their father when you decided your pleasure mattered more than their peace. He stepped forward. Can we please just talk? We're talking. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. She smiled, not warm, not cruel, just final. You didn't just hurt me. You dismantled the foundation of a family. You turned my safe spaces into battlegrounds, and you did it over and over with a smug smile and a cardigan-wrapped lie. Cole tried to respond. Maybe explain. Maybe cry. But Natalie held up a hand. This isn't a movie, Cole. There's no last-minute redemption arc. You don't get to knock on the door and get forgiven because you showed up looking sad. He swallowed hard. I want to be part of their lives. You want access, she corrected, because you're afraid of being erased. Then she stepped closer, inches from him now. I don't need to erase you. You'll do that yourself. And with that, she nodded to Maya. Please show him out. Cole didn't fight. He just turned around, shoulders sagging, and walked back down the front steps, out of Natalie's life. Maybe for the first time, fully aware that he had no power left to reclaim. That night, Natalie fed the twins by the window, the quiet hum of lullabies playing low from her phone. She didn't cry. Not even when she looked at their tiny hands and thought of everything they'd never have to know. Not if she did her job right. She wasn't building her life again. She was building something new. And this time it wouldn't be made of borrowed trust or recycled lies. Spring arrived slowly. The twins were almost a month old now, their tiny feet tucked into fuzzy socks, their breathing still new and uneven, like they were practicing life one sleepy inhale at a time. Natalie had settled into a rhythm. Feedings, naps, diaper changes, deep breaths, healing, rebuilding. Not everything was fixed. There were still moments when her chest tightened at night, when she woke up and reached for a man who no longer deserved to share her space, when she remembered Celia's voice and felt a wave of betrayal that no amount of time would fully erase. But the anger wasn't sharp anymore. It was smooth now, contained, filed under lessons instead of loss. The article she'd posted under a pseudonym had been picked up by a larger media blog, then a podcast, then a women's roundtable talk. People weren't just reading her story, They were sharing their own. And that, more than anything, reminded Natalie that this wasn't just about Cole or Celia. It was about how people betray each other quietly, in rooms with closed curtains and polite smiles. How manipulation doesn't always come from men in dark alleys, but sometimes from the woman who used to braid your hair. One quiet morning, as sunlight spilled into the nursery and one of the twins slept curled on her chest, Natalie looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't look broken. She didn't even look angry anymore. She looked like a woman who had walked through fire and decided to stop apologizing for how loud her footsteps were afterward. She picked up her phone and recorded one last message. This time, not a voice memo, but a video. No filters, no music. Just her holding her baby. To the women who've ever been made to feel like they were imagining things. To the girls who were groomed under the disguise of care. To anyone who thought loyalty meant silence. You are not crazy, you are not weak, and you are not alone. If you're watching this, tell me where you're watching from. And if this story reminded you of someone you love, or someone you lost, leave a comment, speak up, because your voice might be the one that helps someone else speak too. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, not just for the story, but because silence has taken enough from all of us already. She hit upload, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid of being seen. She felt free.